It occurred to me that much of political debate is over certain value judgments, so here I'm going to analyze what the underlying fundamental value of society is, and then analyze what type of society would fit this value in order to discover what kind of society we ought to strive to create. Well, to discover a value behind a principle, we can ask what justifies such a principle in the first place. Take the NAP, for example, the non-aggression principle. Well, why is aggression wrong? Why is coercion wrong? Take a policy such as minimum wage. So-called progressives want to set a minimum wage in order to secure a living for the workers. The right wants to allow businesses to pay whatever wage they see fit. They think this will allow more employment opportunities and competition, which would also benefit the workers. These things are meaningful to us because we believe that we ought to do that which causes the least amount of harm. Why is coercion wrong? Why is aggression wrong? Because it causes harm. Why is competition and employment opportunities for the workers good? Why is having a living wage for the workers good? Because it minimizes harm. Harm is thought of as bad because it brings about a negative emotion, creating a barrier to seeking positive emotion. So the core value here is positive emotion, or human happiness. A proper living, employment opportunity, freedom from aggression and coercion are meaningless unless it creates a better path towards the positive emotion happiness. Each individual's happiness is subjective, and everyone ought to be allowed to seek their own unique path to satisfy themselves. This is not to say, however, that everything is subjective here. There are definitely obstacles which objectively prevent one's utility. For example, a society where everybody is constantly at war is not preferable to a society where there is constant peace. This tells us all arguments within the political arena base themselves on the assumption that we ought to prevent all obstacles which might interfere with someone being fully able to satisfy their happiness. Or we ought to limit the negative emotions which society might cause and provide a path for the best potential of obtaining positive emotions. This is something that all political debate assumes. It is therefore a fundamental aspect for the formation of society. You can't really get around this either. If you say something is wrong or bad and we ought to do this thing, you're assuming that because it's going to be better for that society. In other words, it's going to prevent negative emotion and allow for a better path for positive emotions. So, which society actually has more potential for happiness and less potential for obstacles towards this goal? Let's look at a market economy. A market economy is plagued with uncertainty. The market is a mere emergence of individual actions which ebb and flow over time. It's based not on anything rational or some acting direction overall, it's just based on chaos and anarchy. Employment, wages, cost of living ultimately depend on this market, which is impersonal and chaotic. To think it will fully satisfy everyone all the time is clearly absurd. The market's undirected and impersonal. It's only responding to supply and demand, and it cares for nothing else. Humanity is not the primary object of its focus. Unemployment is something which prohibits people from obtaining positive happiness, and is a huge cause of negative emotion. While employment through a market is just merely based on the laws of supply and demand, markets cannot actually end unemployment in the first place. It's better for employers to have a huge oversupply of laborers to drive the cost of wages down, since wages themselves are in a market and therefore are determined by the supply of laborers and the demand for labor. More supply means more competition among the workers, and not enough demand to meet that supply means driving down wages. Even under a free market with best possible competition, this would still bring about a ton of stress for the workers and the business owners themselves. The business owners have to ensure they are besting the competition all the time, and so do the workers, otherwise they'll all be out of a job. There is also a possibility of recession and crisis to worry about. This is because markets are irrational. They base society around an abstract concept of humanity, profits. They're not basing it around humanity itself. So we ought to have a society which is based around humanity itself and strives to meet their needs. By definition, a society which centers around humanity and human needs has a better potential for realizing human happiness. Such a society would have to be an economy planned, and therefore have its means of production collectivized. You need a rational plan over the economy, and to do this you have to have the ownership of the means of production be collective. This is socialism. The inescapable conclusion is that the fundamental goal of society is incompatible with capitalism or any other market economy and only compatible with a socialist planned economy. Only a socialist planned economy has the best potential to solve issues of poverty, unemployment, and all else which prevent barriers towards human happiness, precisely because it actually focuses on these things directly instead of indirectly through a market and the laws of supply and demand. Any argument for capitalism or against socialism therefore has the base assumption that socialism has a better potential to fix any issues raised in their arguments, making them logically incoherent. Take the argument that capitalism allows for the most amount of individual freedom. Why is freedom good and preferable? Because it brings about less harm and coercion. These things are good because it allows for less negative emotion to exist. Yet a society actively directed towards these principles of liberty and positive emotion, by definition, has more potential to bring about these things. Or how about the claim that communism has killed 1 billion people? Again, you're assuming the principle that negative emotion should be eliminated, which again implies we ought to seek communism because it directly deals with this issue. At best, any argument against socialism would not actually be an argument against any sort of thing that's systematic to socialism, but merely, at best, just claiming that we ought to adapt socialism towards a certain principle. And any argument for capitalism is self-contradictory. Now, perhaps some will attempt to bypass this claim by saying, well, capitalism is the only proper practical system to act upon, which, although flawed, is better than socialism. They would agree with the theoretical aspects of socialism, yet even assuming the claim that all attempts at socialist planning have ended up causing more harm than good, and as we shall soon see this is not the case, there is still the fact that there are a ton of different models of economic planning, especially in the day and age of modern computing. So this claim is assuming that all possible concepts of planning which has been tried, and this is clearly not the case. So the claim that there is no better alternative is baseless, and the principle that socialism has a better potential remains. Now, empirical evidence does demonstrate that socialist planning that has existed, as new as it was, did actually do a good job of eliminating negative emotion and present a better path towards happiness than capitalism. A study published on PubMed analyzed the physical quality of health of capitalist and socialist nations with similar economic development. Physical quality of life being the indicators of health, health services, and nutrition, that is, infant mortality rate, child death rate, life expectancy, population per physician, population per nursing person, and daily per capita calorie supply, along with the measures of education, that is, adult literacy rate, enrollment in secondary education, and enrollment in higher education. And their conclusion was this: in 28 of 30 comparisons between countries at similar levels of economic development, socialist countries showed more favorable physical quality of life outcomes. It's no wonder, since a planned economy can provide full employment, no homelessness, low prices for necessary goods, free education, and healthcare. That is precisely because humanity is over the economy. The economy is not over humanity. It's no wonder why only 28% of Russians actually support capitalism, and a majority, 58%, support a planned economy. I will leave you with this quote from a man named Anvar, a former member of the USSR. "We lost a lot with the disappearance of the Soviet Union that left us in a pitiful situation. I am a teacher, and I can tell you that the impact of changes really weigh on public service professionals. Today, we draw minimum wages that are not even sufficient to provide for the basic needs of the home. My salary is equivalent to a sum of $300 a month, which I spend right away for 2 weeks of food for the family. Fortunately, my wife works too, and her wages allow us to pay for the remaining 2 weeks of the month. Previously, during the Soviet era, life was quite different. We had decent wages that allowed us to live reasonably. We could buy goods, a car, pay for cultural activities and sports, a dacha, a trip to another country of the USSR, etc. While today, we can only buy food and pay for gas and electricity. In the morning, you get up and you wonder how to make money.
Пламя октября в глазах бойца.